Bitcoin is crashing again. And a new document that was leaked to the SEC shows a massive US Bitcoin plan. Here, a strategic Bitcoin reserve of $89 trillion was leaked in the US, but I know that sounds pretty ridiculous right now because Bitcoin's price is crashing hard at the moment, and that's mainly related to Donald Trump and his new statements about tariffs. We're seeing a massive pullback, the massive statement from Michael Saylor, but we're also looking at the crash, because right now, it's really the case that massive positions are being liquidated again. I'm also hearing more and more people saying things like, wow, I bought Bitcoin at $100,000, $107,000, and so on. I'm selling everything now. What the hell is this? And so many people are really freaking out and losing control. I can only say, folks, stay calm. Selling Bitcoin right now could be a really, really bad move in 2 or 3 years. Yes, we have a very, very bad sentiment right now in the short term, but we are always looking at things here. Long term, it just looks super bullish, even if we have short-term pullbacks. Here again is a reminder that the fundamentals have not changed at all. People who are panicking right now just don't get Bitcoin's fundamentals, and nothing has changed here. The only thing that has changed is the sentiment. Attention, pay attention, folks. We have massive waves of liquidation again, so people who went long, who bet on increasing shorts, have been liquidated. Then there's a cascade downwards, and this has simply happened several times now. On top of that, there's uncertainty because of Donald Trump, who has also brought more uncertainty into the market with tariffs and stuff like that, because he also made new statements here. We have 25% tariffs here, which March 4th will come into effect here for Canada and Mexico. And we've seen that happen over and over again. In the past, there was a statement from Donald Trump about tariffs. Then the market corrected massively at first, but it shot back up pretty quickly. We need to see if the rebound comes back up relatively quickly, and there's just a certain level of uncertainty in the market. And when the long positions get liquidated, you just see the price drop. But now the crazy story around Michael Saylor is actually coming up. You can hardly believe it. Michael Saylor was indeed invited to a secret meeting with the new crypto task force, and they discussed how to take Bitcoin to the next level in the U.S. And now hold on to your hats. According to this document, a strategic Bitcoin reserve of up to $81 trillion is supposed to be built up. Do you know what that means? The current Bitcoin market capitalization is around $2 trillion, and they are talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve of $81 trillion. And in the worst case scenario, it's supposed to be only $16 trillion. I mean, those are numbers that are almost unimaginable. That would mean an absolute Valhalla explosion here. There are almost no superlatives left to describe it. But you also have to say that this is said very, very optimistically. But Michael Saylor really seems to be going all out here. So if these are really genuine documents, and we also see very clearly that Michael Saylor shared this, and the documents look really solid here, so it looks really based here. So it looks like the absolute master plan is about to be pushed through. I mean, we have to say that nothing has been officially confirmed yet, or something like that. There's no official announcement yet. You just know that it was discussed here. And it may also be that it will be rejected later, or something like that. But it's really a huge deal that they're not just saying, let's buy a few thousand Bitcoins or something, but instead talking about an $81 million strategic Bitcoin reserve. Then, you'd be buying well over 1 million Bitcoins. In other words, at the current state, you'd be looking to buy up the entire Bitcoin network, but that's not really possible because as soon as you buy 1 million Bitcoins, the price of Bitcoin goes up, and then eventually, there might not be any sellers left, and the price of Bitcoin could skyrocket into the stratosphere. And then maybe you really do need a few trillion here to buy 10,000 Bitcoins or something. But that would then put us in ranges where the Bitcoin price is far, far away, at over 1 million, but 81 trillion, that's just unimaginable. It's also tough to predict where the Bitcoin price would be if a strategic Bitcoin reserve of 81 trillion comes into play, because that would also mean that other nations might bid as well. And other new players are also coming into the Bitcoin game. That would pump the Bitcoin price up so massively that it would also be so present in the mainstream that retailers would then jump on it, whether the whole thing is a success or not. And then we'd probably have, if the US were to throw 81 trillion into Bitcoin, not just a market cap of 81 trillion for Bitcoin, but maybe 200 or 300 trillion. Because we also have to assume that the US isn't the only player in the Bitcoin network, and that just drives up the price. It drives up so high that other players will also pay massive prices just to get their hands on even the smallest fractions of Bitcoin. And that's really the case where you can honestly say that 0.1 Bitcoin or 0.01 Bitcoin is wealth for generations or something like that. When we really see prices like that, I mean, there are always people who come up with predictions like 200, 300 millions per Bitcoin or something like that. I think Marty Moss has already made a prediction like that. But I mean, when such numbers are being thrown around, from Michael Saylor, if that gets implemented, I mean, then we're looking at Bitcoin prices well over 10 million or heading toward 100 million, and I don't know how much. But like I said, that's a lot of hopium. We need to see what actually gets implemented. I know that a lot of people are feeling really bearish right now. Oh, the Bitcoin price is just chilling, and who knows what else. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. About the Bitcoin price, why it's currently just chilling, why it's going to go back up soon, and why you shouldn't worry about it right now. Especially now that there are such massive plans in place. From the SEC, the Crypto Task Force, and also here, Michael Saylor. I mean, it all started here with Eleanor Turret. She shared this here last Friday, on the 21st. In February, Michael Saylor met with the SEC. So it seems like that was a secret meeting or something. By now, it's obviously public. Maybe it was already public back then, but no one was paying attention to it. In any case, the news has only just come out here, and now there is discussion here, not only about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but also about a taxonomy, general regulation, that the tax system should simply be optimized again. That Bitcoin and crypto can be pushed further in the USA, but that the bird has been shot. And there's really this one scene where they were discussing the strategic Bitcoin reserve. There was a sheet from Michael Saylor that got shared. Let me see if I can find that. Here, you can see it. Here, Michael Saylor basically posted under Eleanor Turret's post. You can see the original document here. He shared the digital asset framework again. That was on February 24th. And then you can just check, okay, what's included in the whole digital framework? And the blog trainer summed this up really, really well. Here's the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Let me read this to you real quick. I'll also put a link to the whole article down below. Here it says that the much-discussed strategic Bitcoin reserve is mentioned in the document as one of the key points. The goal is to build Bitcoin reserves worth between $16 to $81 trillion to offset national debt in the long run. Admittedly, that sounds very utopian even for die-hard Bitcoin maximalists. And that's what I was just talking about. Yeah, we're always ultra bullish. We're also getting more bullish on this channel, like many other channels. But you have to say, this is already at a level that's almost hard to imagine. I mean, that's probably not planned for the next 1 or 2 years, but maybe in the next, I don't know, 20, 30, or even 50 years. I don't know how long they plan for after that, because it also says here, we want to reduce national debt. And that's the big plan, to buy Bitcoin here to reduce national debt. But even Michael Saylor doesn't expect his predictions to come true. That national debt can be paid off in 3 or 4 years, or something like that is not what he thinks. He once published some tables. I don't know exactly, but it was 2040, 2045. Those were the rough guidelines, and then there were different scenarios. Depending on how much Bitcoin you buy and how aggressively you go about it, you could potentially pay off your debt in 20 to 25 years. And it looks like it's heading towards accumulating those $16 to $81 trillion over the next 20, 25, or even 50 years. And I mean, you can look at it differently. Now that sounds like a lot, but let's say we hit a Bitcoin price of $1 million in 3 or 4 years, and we multiply our investment tenfold. Then, those 16 to 81 trillion wouldn't seem so crazy anymore, because in relation to the entire market, it's a whole different game. So, that would still be massive. But then the ratio would look a bit better here. But you probably have to add a bit more on top of that. One would probably have to assume a Bitcoin price of 3, 4, 5 million. And only then would the Marty of 16 to 81 trillion be reasonably well in relation to the entire Bitcoin network. Because it can't be that the US ends up holding 50% of the Bitcoin network or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen anyway, because then other people will start buying too. And that really shouldn't be in the interest of the US either, because if the US is betting on Bitcoin, they should have an interest in the decentralization of Bitcoin as well. I mean, if they have 50% of the Bitcoin network, then they still can't change the rules, but it's still kind of weird and snide. And I think a lot of people wouldn't be too happy if there was an entity here, somehow having 50% of the Bitcoin network. But like I said, that's all still very, very much up in the air right now. Mind-blowing. There's really nothing going on right now, signed or anything like that, nothing at all, officially confirmed. But there are talks happening here, and even if it's only 50% of that, or just 10% of the targeted 81 trillion, it would still be a massive number. And the big question would be whether all of this flows into the stockpile, meaning the strategic Bitcoin reserve, or if it might actually partially go into the sovereign wealth fund, which is also currently being planned. That still needs to be looked into. It also says here that while the proposed measures certainly have the potential to fundamentally transform the financial market, there are still many open questions regarding the practical implementation and the long-term stability of such measures. The coming months and years will show whether these plans are actually feasible or if they will fail due to regulatory, economic, and geopolitical challenges. What's clear is that the door to making the US the crypto capital of the world, as Donald Trump demands, is now wide open. And if you want to be the crypto capital, the crypto elite, and so on, yeah, then we have to go with aggressive Bitcoin. Michael Saylor is calling for us to sell all our gold too, from the solutions. We then go into Bitcoin, because that makes a lot more sense. Because gold is an old technology. Now we have to focus on space technology. Now it's time for the next step. We're getting into Bitcoin. We're printing money, we're selling gold, we're taking everything we can leverage. And that in Bitcoin, that already sounds a bit like it. As if the MicroStrategy tactics should now be applied one-to-one to the USA, because MicroStrategy, one could also say, is buying like mad. And if you just take it one level higher, to a state level, then the 16 trillion suddenly makes sense again. I mean, the 81 trillion still doesn't make sense, but at least the 16 trillion might make sense if you say, Okay, you leverage everything you can, you take on all the capital you can, you sell everything you can, and then dump it all into Bitcoin. I mean, if the plan works out, then the US could be debt-free in 20 years. The US is the absolute superboss. The US dollar is getting stronger. Here, Bitcoin is being massively pumped up. Elon Musk is always talking about wanting to have a stable budget here. So, a balanced budget. I think we're still missing something like that. 4.5 billion a day or something like that, which would need to be saved additionally to reach the goal. And those are already some really exciting things, which we definitely need to keep an eye on. But it could also be that Michael Saylor actually raised the digital asset framework on purpose just to have some room to negotiate. He might be saying, okay, let's aim for 81 trillion, and if in the end it only turns out to be 5 trillion, then we're still happy. I mean, $5 trillion, that would still be ridiculous. Crazy. I mean, the Bitcoin price would probably already be in the millions if we had a US $5 trillion reserve, or the Bitcoin price would certainly already be over a million if we break through the 5 trillion. And even if it's only 2 trillion, you would have basically replicated the entire market that currently exists in the Bitcoin network, give or take. There was a pretty cool post from Marty that clearly explains why all the current corrections and the panic in the market are totally unwarranted. Even with these movements happening with MicroStrategy and all, if this really goes through. With Michael Saylor, with the US, and so on. Also, if the Fed gets audited, if Fort Knox gets audited and all that, it could trigger an absolute Bitcoin earthquake. So, now is absolutely not the right time to be bearish, at least in my opinion. This post says, folks, we've been experiencing a Bitcoin rally since 2023 without any quantitative easing, without interest rate cuts, without liquidity injections, just through institutional entry into ETFs. There hasn't been a bull market yet. So, the bull market hasn't even started yet. Wait for the Federal Reserve, the central bank, and the U.S. Don't fight it. When the U.S. announces a stop to quantitative easing and the start of stimulus measures and interest rate cuts, there will be a bull market. Your job now is to accumulate. Your job is to buy Bitcoin now while the FAT campaign is in full swing. And the sentiment regarding no free money and degenerate gambling. Bad news is your exit is at the end of quantitative easing, not here. Don't mess it up. So he's saying here quite simply, the bull market phases and the bull run phases, when it really escalates epically upwards, is when the Valhalla vibes come in. That's always been the case when the central bank starts bringing massive money packages to the market. They drop interest rates massively, do quantitative easing, and so on. And if we remember, right now there's still quantitative tightening going on. They massively lowered the interest rates, did quantitative easing, and so on. And if we remember, at the moment there is still quantitative tightening. This means that the balance sheets will not be relaxed here. This means that massive amounts of money are not being pumped in, but rather money is actually being taken out. And now you can wait and see. Okay, when does the quantitative easing start here? Some say it's going to happen this year, at the end of the year, or in the middle of the year. Nobody really knows. Maybe we actually have to wait until next year. I don't know what it looks like, but anyway, if we look at it historically, that's also the big theory. That, for example, some people say, okay, having cycles don't really decide the Bitcoin price, it's the global liquidity. And if we look, global liquidity has always increased massively in election years. We're not seeing it as aggressively this time as we did in past cycles. And that's why many are still waiting for the M2 money supply to fully explode upwards. And then the massive Bitcoin price increases come. And then it's also the time to sell if you want to time the cycles here. Well, I'm not a big fan of it, timing the cycles, because a lot of people really burn their fingers on that. We can also see that if that really is the case here, we won't see any massive stimulus packages in the next few months, but that they might not come until the end of the year or next year. Then, according to Marty, the bull run could be delayed by another year or year and a half. And the bull run phase hasn't even started yet. It's still to come. And only after the liquidity packages have been passed, after interest rates have been reduced to almost zero, after here again, they start doing quantitative easing here. They start buying government bonds and so on, after all these packages have gone through, and then the Bitcoin price really shoots up parabolically. And then the media will jump back in, and all the retailers will come back too. I mean, the retail market isn't even here yet. Only after that happens, according to Marty Pardin, is it a good time to sell here. I would still be very, very cautious here because you never know if there's going to be another super cycle, if the cycles might break, if they'll be longer, or if they'll be shorter, and so on. We also have, I talked about it recently, in the live call here at Bitcoin Advantage, we're discussing how the cycles look and what it's all about. And yes, in the past, it has always repeated itself. And now a lot of people are saying, okay, it's going to repeat itself again. And many folks also say, okay, this time is different. A lot of times, it really wasn't different. But we are seeing certain, let's say, things that are changing with the cycles. For example, this time we hit the all-time high before the halving. Normally, it was always after the halving and stuff. There are definitely some changes. Timing the cycles can backfire. If you're doing something like that, I'd always recommend doing it with 10 or 20% or something like that. But what you need to take away from this, no matter if you're buying or selling based on timing or not, is that everyone has to know for themselves. That according to this metric, this perspective, and this analysis, the bull market, the bull run, hasn't really even started yet. That's exactly what someone like Adam Back says, who also says, hey, it just can't be that the Bitcoin price is only at 100,000 US dollar is. There's so much massive news There's an absolute information asymmetry. All that information isn't priced in at all. When all of that gets priced in, and then on top of that, the liquidity comes into the market, then the Bitcoin price will skyrocket. Even though the situation looks hopeless right now, and it seems like we have a stablecoin just moving sideways. Guys, we've always had this in the past. We just need to be patient here until the next breakout comes. But hey, if anything happens with the things that are currently being planned behind the scenes, like the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, the 81 trillion, if even a part of that flows into Bitcoin, or if the Fed gets audited and the dollar game starts losing more trust, more people will come to Bitcoin. Or if there's more institutional adoption coming in, or if the money floodgates get opened up. There are so many ways right now for the Bitcoin price to break out upwards. And that's why you should just stay cool, stay chill, and see this whole thing as a buying opportunity. I'll drop a link in. We at 21 Bitcoin. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Let me know what you think about that. Regarding the current situation with the heavy announcements here. We'll see each other then. Peace out.